Good morning, everyone. Here from Finland, and we are continuing with our Science of Triangles, and really almost at the end of this section in Esoteric Astrology. I'll have to think of something new for us if I can, either by next time or by the time after that. Happy to see you here, and welcome Anna and Catherine and Joe. Excuse me, and Carrie, Leslie, Mariana, Martha, Miro. Um, okay, hold on. Yeah, Natni and Nesa, Risto and Vashali, and Vera, Zenaidi and Veronica. Glad you are here, and Michael is here on staff helping me stay directed. Excuse me. Right, okay. Sometimes those little things come upon you. Well, I always begin with a little bit concerning the never-ending, it seems, uh, American election and its aftermath. We have passed the safe harbor day when all but a very few states have certified their vote counts. And what it means, basically, none of those states that have not certified, as far as I know, I'll find out a little bit later, are the swing states that the present document of the White House was hoping to upend, at the same time disenfranchising millions of voters. Breathtaking in its intentions. Now, although the ploys continue and the attempts to undermine continue, it's looking less and less likely that they could succeed. The one of success would be such delays because of the submission of endless lawsuits, such delays that it would be have to be thrown into the Congress. And there, at least in the House of Representatives, well, really in both houses, the Martian red has the advantage simply because of the number of states which are connected to it, the number of states in which they are the majority. I think it's very unlikely, and we seem to be heading in the direction of a confirmation of the Jupiterian blue. I keep on talking about it in terms of qualities and not so much in terms of personalities. It's true that there are several personalities which represent the red and the blue, a very symbolic representation. But we have to keep our mind on the qualities that are involved. The blue quality suggests the indigo, which is the color of the Christ, the color of the soul of our planetary logos, the color of the soul of our solar logos, the great and synthetic ray, which after all must prevail. So we'll our work together, and we continue at night. Again, let's see, this is a Wednesday here, at least in Europe, and we continue at the 8 o'clock GMT time. And we uphold this, our own little version of the Great Defending Wall, by means of which our own radiation of illumination and of unification or love and of spiritual sacrificial will um, conditions the thought atmosphere in which all of this is taking place. Yesterday there was a tremendous impulse from the Supreme Court of the nation. Nobody knew what to expect, but the attempt to throw out 2.5 million votes was stopped. And Pennsylvania, which is a pivotal state and which puts Biden well over the mark that he needs, did maintain its present stance. And it was not possible to disenfranchise Pennsylvania, according to it was simply denied by the Supreme Court. So that is a very positive indication. We've been, I'll just say that Mr. Trump has been obsessed by this, and it seems only this, and has neglected a great surging, a tremendously dangerous surging of cases and deaths in the United States. When you have a person who is obsessed, and it may be closer to the original esoteric meaning than we would like to think, it's a dangerous situation. One never knows what can be attempted, whether it has connection with the law or whether it is lawless. Remember, we're living through a time that is called the withering of the law, and that America, or the United States, is the heir to the Piscean sixth ray civilization. So we have to expect that there will be some kind of disintegration in process. Now, the question is, how dangerous is that for the United States? How dangerous is it for world democracy? This is what we're keeping our eye on. And, excuse me, every night, 8 o'clock during the week, GMT, and 10 o'clock during the weekends, we continue to pay attention through this meditative vigil and through the reading and discussion of important sections from the Tibetan writings, which have to do with this very problem between the lines of demarcation, between the dweller on the threshold of humanity and the angel of the presence of humanity. So, as Master DK has suggested, we continue with Great Invocation number 2. Let the Lords of Liberation issue forth. Let them bring succor to the sons of men. Let the rider from the secret place come forth, and coming, save. Come forth, O Mighty One. Let the souls of men awaken to the light, and may they stand with massed intent. Let the fiat of the Lord go forth, The end of woe has come. Come forth, O mighty one. The hour of service of the saving force has now arrived. Let it be spread abroad, O mighty one. Let light and love and power and death fulfill the purpose of the coming one. The will to save is here. The love to carry forth the work is widely spread abroad. The active aid of all who know the truth is also here. Come forth, O mighty one, and blend these three. Construct a great defending wall. The rule of evil now must end. And thus we carry on at a critical juncture in humanity's history, when the great change of kingdoms is about to take place. We call that the first initiation of humanity, and it is signaled by the reappearance of the Christ. When he reappears, it will mean that that portion of humanity which can, at this time, take the first initiation has taken it, and that the mass consciousness has been leavened to a considerable extent, and a whole new era will begin for us, and all the wonders of the Aquarian age will have their opportunity to manifest, not always with ease at first, and for that we have to be ready in our next few incarnations. But the law, since Saturn is a ruler of Aquarius, the law will manifest. And Saturn is also the ruler of the first 10 degrees of Aquarius. And even though some people are considered to be entering from the Venusian, the Venus side, and will come under the effect of Venus first, Saturn is the general ruler and marks the entrance to the age. So the lawlessness of impulsive Mars will be tamed. I'm remembering, Dane Rudhyar, he was just an excellent astrologer, and all these rosy things were being written and sung and said about the age of Aquarius. And he said, well, from my perspective, it will be the age of management. And not a very inspiring word, perhaps, but it means that we as a human race will bring a degree of necessary order to the physical plane, and that we will work with what we call not materialism, but a spiritualized respect for matter. Inasmuch as Saturn, well, let's say Aquarius, rules the lowest of the creative hierarchies, and then of course they just keep going in some kind of cycle, rising higher and higher. But It is an age in which we learn how to spiritualize matter, spiritualization of matter. And already that is beginning to happen with the understanding that there is a bioelectric field underlying everything we normally consider to be materialistic or dense matter. Unfortunately, there are those among us, and it's only natural, I suppose, whose thought power is stopped when regarding the evident dense matter. They don't believe in anything beyond it, and that's part of our educational work to bring the subtle energies into view. And increasingly, the experiments which already exist will be enhanced, and before long, it will simply be a foregone conclusion that the bioelectric field and other fields simply do exist. Remember what he said, DK, in 1945 at that stupendous event, which was the liberation of atomic energy in a very destructive way. He said at the same time, it signaled the death of materialism. And we're living in that era when increasingly a strictly a strict attention to materialism, as if it were the only reality, is fading and fading and fading. Now, let's see where we are here. We are, well, getting, as I say, very, very near the end. There's so much he could have said and so many triangles we can consider, but the important thing, I think, has been that we understand something of the method of these triangles in revolution according to the law of mutation, and how it is that the triangles energize the outworking of the divine plan and are occurring at many different levels, etheric, planetary, interplanetary, solar systemic, and beyond. The triangles are a rather universal structure. And we have to understand, I suppose, the particular triangles that are operative in our own life and how we can make the best of them, how we can bring balance into our lives by understanding how the triangles work. And we have certainly emphasized the rising sign, the sun sign, and the moon sign as one vital triangle in any incarnation. And if we are far enough advanced, that the monad can begin to mean something other than just a word, then we have the point opposite the sun sign, the rising sign, and the sun sign itself. In addition to many other factors, I mean, the astrologer of the future will be interpreting the chart in terms of evident triangles which can be balanced and whose energies can be utilized to accomplish certain things. It's so important to know what we came into this incarnation to do, really. I mean, many of us drift through and we find and we follow certain social indications, and we try to make the best of our life, and we go through in a somewhat conventional manner. This is not the way of the student of esotericism. And what can we call ourselves except students of esotericism? We are not yet the true esotericists. That is very, very long training and probably involves achieving minimally the third initiation, which in the case of DK students was still quite an objective. Most of them were aiming at achieving the second degree and not even in that particular life. So we cannot minimize the rigors involved in achieving even the initiations of the threshold. Okay, let's go forward here. I know it's rather maybe small print, but at the moment it seems to be what it is. Let's see if I can raise it up just a little bit so that it becomes more more visible. So DK is summarizing here. I have pointed out certain relations between the various constellations. Oh, and I might say between the signs, which are extensions of the constellations and areas of concentrated influence, gathering the energies of the constellations. I have pointed out certain relations between various constellations. The esoteric planets, and note, I made a point here, not so much the hierarchical planets, but when considering triangles, like for instance Aries, it would be wise to consider the hierarchical triangle. You know, it would be Mars orthodox, Mercury esoteric, and Uranus hierarchical. But in general, people like ourselves are attempting to move beyond the application of the ordinary planets while not dismissing them, because they still are active, into the influence of the esoteric planets, about which normal astrology has very little idea. That's one of the beauties of this presentation that he has given us, how we learn to respond to greater potentials of the planets and of the signs and constellations than had hitherto been within our purview. We had not imagined that certain of these other planetary powers, let us say, were actually associated with these signs, but now we are given the reason that it is existing in that way. So he's given us certain relations, and the whole thing really is about the science of relations. Sometimes I think to myself, is there a science which is the most thoroughgoing of all sciences and includes all others? Now, DK says, in a way, it's astrology, the oldest and greatest of all the sciences. And when I think of it, I think that the science of relations underlies even the science of astrology. At least that's my own particular take on the matter. So, various constellations, the esoteric planets, and our Earth. I have shifted the approach of the astrological student away from the world of tangible happenings. You know, that would be like strictly exoteric astrology, and there's nothing wrong with that. Let's just say I oftentimes think to myself that a good esoteric astrologer is one who can also deal with the world of appearances, the more exoteric causes. But at least he knows more so what is behind those exoteric appearances. So anyway, he's shifted our attention, he says, away from the world of tangible happenings, precipitated events, what will happen to me, that kind of astrology, and personal characteristics, which are interesting, of course, but there are also the soul characteristics and personal characteristics which are distinctive of exoteric modern astrology. And remember, he's writing in the 1930s, so this is, maybe writing years and years ago, 85 years ago, something like that. Into the world of conditioning energies, controlling incentives, impulses, and causes. So this is how he tells us we are now thinking. And I suppose any, sincere student of the Tibetan would find that, in fact, he is thinking more in terms of what's behind the obvious. The whole science of triangles is very subtle. Every once in a while, you see something working out on the physical plane that it's tangible, but behind it is something more. For instance, we've been doing a lot of work with the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch of government in the United States. Well, behind all that are the causes which involve the will, which involve a legislative attitude, weighing and balancing, very much under Libra, and which involve the judicial attitude to see what is in alignment with the law. So deeper factors are behind that triangle of the White House, the legislature of Congress, and the Supreme Court. Always try to discern the deeper factor behind the obvious. That is, that is a general rule and a very good one. It has to do with the very first ability that we find within the causal body. We call it spiritual discernment. So, I've shifted your attention, he says, and have thus laid down the basis for an inner esoteric astrology which must govern this ancient science in the future. I mean, we're going to be looking for black squares and yellow stars and blue triangles, and all of this will imitate the kinds of charts which inwardly the masters used and continue to use, I might say. So, I have emphasized in your consciousness the web of light and energy, which is the recipient of zodiacal and other extra systemic forces. I guess, he means, for instance, those constellations which are definitely part of the one about whom naught may be said, and the three great constellations like the Great Bear, Sirius/Little Bear, and the major Pleiades, extra systemic forces. And I pointed to the first dim outline of the astrology of the soul and of the unfolding consciousness of man. This is, esotericism is all about consciousness. It's all about the growth and sensitization of consciousness. Now, we don't know exactly when it is that any one of us was individualized and what were the prevailing astrological circumstances at the time, and how much those prevailing energies influenced the nature of our soul horoscope. I'm sure the soul has been through a number of cycles. Our causal body has had a number of renewals and introductions into new environments and into new sets of energies. So well does he speak then of the dim beginnings here. What does he say? The dim outline of the astrology of the soul. It's just the beginning, and in a few hundred years, I suspect we will know much more. I have presented to you some esoteric facts, at least they are facts for him, which, and for us, they are hypotheses that we can hold and test out, perhaps. I have presented to you some esoteric facts, which must, for a while at least, remain hypotheses and theories to the average astrologer, and here comes the humor, and probably unwelcome ones at that. Unwelcome hypotheses, unwelcome theories. You know how we'd like a nice little bundle of rules that the concrete mind feels secure with. But in fact, he's just opened the whole subject up tremendously and left behind so much of the conventional astrology, whether it takes place in the Vedic system or the tropical system or the sidereal system. He's left very much behind, while not discounting it, in his opening up of new vistas. So, you know, what I said here is that Master DK has a Uranian function. I have made statements, he says, which are necessarily revolutionary in nature. And it takes a while. I mean, maybe if this is the first kind of astrology we've come into, we are more open to the possibility that it is truly legitimate. But someone, imagine, being trained for 20, 30, 40 years in the conventional astrology, running into these revolutionary statements, it can be and often is met with resistance. But eventually, Uranus overcomes that. So we'll go with the revolution, shall we say. But when we go with the revolution, we have to realize that these revolutionary propositions are disturbing, okay, if not apparently untrue, or based on premises which deny all that the modern astrologer has worked out and hitherto held dear. So it's a question of attachment, isn't it? Attachment and detachment. We know the tiniest little bit of esotericism. So when something with a larger ring past knot comes along, what do? Do we reject it, or do we fair-mindedly and temporarily entertain it to see what value it may have? Okay, so hopefully the latter is our approach, and we don't resent the intrusion of the truth. That is always a problem. Resenting the intrusion of the truth, or of a greater truth. That is so often the way. And of course, that's what's happening even now among many sixth ray people. They have their dogmatism quite settled, and they know how it will be forever and ever, amen, if you know what I mean. So it is a disturbance, but it is a liberating disturbance when esotericism comes along. Of course, sometimes you have to pay the price, just the way when the Counter-Reformation began around the year 1600 in Italy, Spain. A thinker like Giordano Bruno paid the price, with his life. He introduced far-reaching sort of astrophysical speculations, which were just too much to be tolerated by the dogmatic church. So sometimes there is the necessity to say things which will arouse the ire of the fearful, clinging lower mind. Okay, in this connection, two of these ideas are basic where the astrology of the soul is concerned. And let's see what he means. Number one, the reversal of the life of the disciple upon the wheel of life, by means of which his progress becomes anti-clockwise. Well, I think what that has to do with is the direction of energy flows within the etheric system of the individual, and no dramatic turning of the wheel of life in the sky, so to speak. It is a difference in the relationship between the chakras. So we're responding to astrological energies from our higher centers, which are not stuck below the diaphragm. They reverse course rather than from our lower centers. And the transitional powers, transitional periods, are difficult. One just thinks, well, we're reversing the flow of energy. No, but it can be a very strenuous and frictional time with a tug of war going on between different energies such as sacral and throat, or solar plexus and heart, or maybe even base of the spine and the top of the head. There are battles going on. So the reversal of the life of the disciple upon the wheel of life by means of his progress. And that is oftentimes occurring at the time when a person becomes an aspirant. We are no longer sending the energies down strictly to manifest and to remain fixated in the world below the diaphragm. There is a sending of them up again so that the wheel is completed and the normal astrological direction is followed. Then let's see what else. Two of these ideas are basic. Okay, we call that the reversal of the wheel. And when we work with people, of course, chances are we will be working with people who are reversing the wheel because they're interested maybe in these esoteric things. But we have to say, is this person strictly a personality living the personality life, as is the case with so many millions today, and those who are particularly representing the dweller on the threshold of humanity, and at this time, especially in the United States? Are we working with personalities, or are we working with people for whom the hall of ignorance is being left behind, and they're entering into the hall of learning, and they're learning about the higher of the pairs of opposites within themselves, and they are beginning to aspire to something higher than what engaged them for so many, well, millions actually, of years. Okay, what's the second idea here? The influence of the rising sign, which is held by the esoteric astrologer to indicate soul possibility and direction. Now, note that it's called the driving energies of the rising sign, driving you closer to the center of your spirituality, versus the personality opportunity offered by the nature of the vehicle of response, and I would say especially by the sun sign. So now this is not to say that the rising sign does not have a material influence. It actually does, and it can show up quite early in the life as a material influence. But as life proceeds, as the incarnation proceeds, the higher potencies of the rising sign begin to appear. And then will come a battle, if all goes well, between the direction of the rising sign and the normal direction of the sun, moon, and other planets. And that direction should be noted. That battle, that contention, that contest should be noted. Just the way there's going to be at a certain stage of evolution, and maybe you've noticed it in a recapitulatory manner in your own life, a battle between the soul ray and the personality ray, which is just a microcosmic presentation of the battle between the angel of the presence and the dweller on the threshold. So I've often thought if you can combine your rising sign and your soul ray, representing the higher of the pairs of opposites, and look at the contest which may occur between your sun sign and your personality ray, you've got one of the really important dynamics that can go on in the life of the progressing student of spirituality. But, it's quite necessary to really zero in on these things and be able to identify them. So these are two factors, says the Tibetan. Two of the ideas are basic to the new astrology. Okay, and I'll just kind of put that in there. Basic to the new astrology. And if we can even keep these very simple things in mind, we are in a position to help people who are perplexed, who need guidance, who want to know what is the right way to go. We try to fulfill the higher indications of our rising sign, and we encourage the aspirational nature which arises with the change of energy direction from high to low and then again to high. It's not, again, that we discount the lower chakras. They are necessary in many ways. And you kind of die unless you have them going. But it's a question of what is dominant. What must be the objective? What must be the fulfillment in a higher sense, which is eventual? You look at our planets in our solar system, the planets representing the chakras below the diaphragm unfold first. They're very, very active, they're very magnetic, and they pull the energy right in, and for a long time, the non-sacredness of planets operates. But then eventually, those other planets, which represent more the sacred aspect of man and of the solar system, they begin to unfold. And, sometimes we're shown in the diagrams Uranus and Neptune. You just get conventionalized drawings. You do not get that detailed kind of representation that you get with other planets. That's because they represent such high aspects within the solar system, just the way our own higher chakras represent higher aspects within our energy system, that those higher chakras have not yet really unfolded. They come last. Okay, soul possibility and direction. Just think for a moment, what is at the stage at which you find yourself, no matter at what conventional age you seem to find yourself in terms of the age of the personality, what are your soul possibilities and what really represents the soul direction? Just pondering that a little. Sometimes a mantram will come to you, your own, which signals to you what are your soul possibilities and what direction should you be pursuing. And maybe you are already pursuing it. And maybe there's some adjustments that would make your pursuit and consequently your service even more targeted, even more of value. So let's just say pondering on energy centers and their relationship. Pondering energies or energy centers and their dual or triple relationship is of great value. Sometimes you want to just contemplate the tug of war going on between two factors in your chart. But sometimes you can balance that with a triangulation. You can figure out how the three together can work to bring a new condition of stability, spiritual stability into your life. And then, of course, you become a real disciple and your service increases in quality and you become more valuable to the great cause of elevating humanity. These two ideas, says the Tibetan, are obviously revolutionary. Now, maybe we have so much exposure to Master DK and his thought that they seem, well, like just the truth. But you can imagine an astrologer of 30, 40, even 50 years encountering these things and saying, look, is my whole approach to astrology deficient? Well, in certain ways, yes. But there comes humility and the willingness to entertain how big the picture really is and how we only gain by submitting to the grandeur of the more inclusive truth. It's if we're stuck in our lower ego and we've made something of a reputation out of what we do with astrology or any other science, we sometimes just want to resist what changes it because our whole self-image is built upon what we've done for instance, with the earlier astrology. But if we care more for the truth than we do for our lower ego, we will allow it to come in. I was with a great astrologer once. I'm not going to name names. And I asked him, what do you think of Alice Bailey's Esoteric Astrology? And this is a man who had written many books on the subject and was a world-renowned expert. And I guess the most he could get out of himself was to say, well, it's not astrology as I know it. And you could tell that it was a practiced response on his part. He did not want to give away his kingdom, if you know what I mean. His kingdom was just fine. It was a wonderful kingdom, and many people came to visit it, and he had a great reputation, and still does. But he didn't want to relinquish. He didn't want to somehow accept into his purview this greater type of astrology. So that stuck with me, and I just thought to myself, well, okay, there are always things that we don't want to relinquish because we are attached to them. I mean, when we are attached to the personality of another person, which is so often the case, with family and near ones and all that, and we're told that if we could only relinquish that attachment, we would meet them later on a much higher turn of the spiral. And the intimacy and the beauty of the relationship would be even greater. And yet we tremble to perform that initial release. Eventually, like the Buddha will, and his exemplary life, we will learn how to do that. So these two ideas are obviously revolutionary, and when to them you add the new sets of planetary rulers, which I have given you, quite a few, right? It is not surprising if you feel the vastness of the astrological theme. So I said, as I've been saying, develop a little astrological humility here. This, however, was the first reaction which I hoped to get from you. Astrology must now argue from the universal to the particular, because it must, in the future, deal with soul unfoldment and not with the personality horoscope as hitherto. It doesn't mean, that the personality horoscope has no part in soul unfoldment. It does, and crises present themselves in the personality, which have spiritual soul implications. But we have to recognize what comes first, and we have to have a sense of identity, which is more than that of the personality. Let's see if there's anything else I want to read right here, or whether we just, come another time. Well, I'll tell you, I just will read this coming paragraph, and then we will take it up again, because we're in the summary section of this particular 100-page chapter that we have been studying closely. At this point, I would remind you that nothing I have said, he's always giving you a balanced point of view. Nothing I have said negates the charting of the personality horoscope as at present done in the case of the average man who is proceeding clockwise around the wheel of life, and that means proceeding as a personality and using the signs in a lesser way than is fully possible for the use of those signs. So for that type of individual, that's all you can do. And if you try to throw too much esoteric astrology into it, it's not going to be useful or accurate. I have but brought into your field of astrological research, is he hoping too much for us? The astrology of the human consciousness, of the solar angel, of the son of mind, that's what we are on the higher mental plane, the spiritual man. He has begun that, and I can only imagine, brilliant astrologer that he is, that in the next presentation there will be a great deal on advancing astrology. As a matter of fact, he pretty well said so, that this series of bridging treatises is not over, and he mentioned that in a section when he was talking about astrology per se, where we go deeper and deeper into the great subjects, and we extract from them that which is increasingly useful as we think of ourselves as souls, as spiritual beings. So this was the 9th, and that was the end, and it was 90 and 496. Whoopsie, something's going on here. And this was a morning session. Don't I know it? Okay, and then we'll continue. I'm gathering additional material for you. I mean, at a certain point, the study of the material will end. But this is 496 to 498, I believe. And we'll be looking at the 16th of December, and it will be a PM time. Obviously, a evening session. I don't know why I have it down twice, but I do. And I'll just put the PM in there. Anyway, we gather the knowledge bit by bit, and it begins to coalesce in our minds. A sense of pattern begins to emerge. We begin to know what to expect, and synthesis comes over the entire subject. That's what we want to be able to do, and to bring a new form of balance into our lives through the study of triangles and the activation of these triangles in a way which only noticing them and working with them can guarantee. So, so much, look at your horoscope, you just overlook it. You don't even know it's there. But with this kind of teaching and indication, we begin to see those patterns, and we know they are there, and then we begin to use them. We begin to use them in a way which will bring benefit to ourselves, of course, and thus, because of our orientation, benefit to others. All right, so let's see if there is anything anybody would like to say or suggest or question. This would be the time to do it.
I'm looking for hands raised or questions, comments placed in the chat box. Michael, the second thing with the very large time was really to help people during the period of transferring from daylight saving time to regular time.
I know what you're suggesting. Okay. There we have it in a more normal manner. It also helps me orient myself, you know, like those big numbers.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And the end of this program morning at 6 a.m. GMT.
Correct. Thank you.
Great.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Is there anybody that would like to bring up something that we've been studying or in relation to what we've been studying or something else in relation to occultism in general, spiritual occultism, you know? That people get such a wrong idea of what occultism is. It's really the science of causes and effects, and mostly of hidden causes. And they associate it with all this creepy stuff from the very lowest levels of the astral plane. So we have to straighten that out in people's minds, I would say. Anything that you would like to discuss here? Like to say? Let's have a tiny little review. We didn't do too
Well,
much, but yeah, go ahead.
Michael,
Yeah,
and Veronica has her hand raised.
okay. And so Anne would like to speak, right?
And Anne, Veronica, you're self-muted.
Okay, so
There
Hello,
you go.
hello.
hi. There you are. There you
Good,
are. Okay.
good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Anne.
I'm at Cancer, and I was reading about the water triangle, the water signs, and he was saying that each water sign puts us in a hierarchy. The Cancer sign for humanity, the Scorpio sign for the hierarchy, and um, the Pisces sign for Shambhala. Now, I went to the 12 created hierarchies and I saw that Cancer and Pisces, am I saying it right? Pisces?
Yeah, you can say it that way, Pisces or Pisces or Pisces, you know, different
Oh,
ways of
Pisces,
saying it.
sorry,
Yeah.
Pisces. And I saw that, and I started doing all the triangles, the water triangle, the earth triangle there. And I saw that the water triangle was the only triangle that had two hierarchies that are the one liberated and the one on the verge of liberation. Each triangle that had to do with water, air, or fire had one hierarchy that was liberated, one hierarchy that was on the high levels of the physical plane, and one hierarchy from the lower. But it boggled me because on the one way, Cancer is a very high hierarchy, and on the other hand, it brings in humanity. Could we say that the fifth liberated hierarchy is the hierarchy with the center of the human race? When we say in the Great Invocation,
From the center, which we call the race of men. Well, you know, to me, it's a question of these are great lords of constellations and they operate on different levels. Now, what you're looking at with the connection of Cancer to the moon. See, I just want to find this here because it's I know what it is, and here it is.
I can't
And
express my question very well. There's something there because I see that there are very high hierarchies, and on the other hand, it's like he's
yeah,
showing it a different, completely turning it around and making it completely
and,
different.
and it keeps going too, Anne Veronica. In other words,
He,
all of these cosmic subplanes, they continue to repeat themselves in a certain order. I don't know if it's the same order as is found on the cosmic physical plane. I worked with a man here in Finland who had extended the hierarchies onto cosmic planes, and with some very interesting effects. I mean, he was really reaching way beyond, and the question is, how accurate was it? But this is the Neptune part of the Cancerian hierarchy, and Neptune rules 4 different planes, if I may say. It rules the astral plane, the Buddhic plane, the monadic plane, and the cosmic astral plane as a whole. And what you're witnessing there, you see, actually, the Cancer hierarchy is coming into relationship with the cosmic astral plane, but it has not yet fully established itself. It's still somewhat located on the logoic plane, but when it does, it will bring in the Neptunian energy, which is the most important energy in our present solar system. Now, this is quite different from the elemental energy which the moon veils when looking at the lower part of Cancer. So in fact, you have a great constellational deity operating at different levels. And that's why we don't have to interpret Cancer as being only one thing. In one respect, it has to do with the elements of man and the lunar vehicles and all those things that are, involutionarily kind of resistant to the upward pull. And from another point of view, in its godlike nature, it reveals or veils the Christ energy, an altogether higher demonstration of its capabilities. So we don't have to make it into only one thing. And maybe we could go even further, as like I say, if we start adding different cosmic subplanes and repeating the signs in a certain order. I don't even know what order they would be. Maybe they would simply be in normal order. The only thing that seems out of order here is, let's see if I can, is, and I'm not even quite sure why it is the case, but I want to, let's
Fifth
see,
and the sixth.
the 6th and the 5th hierarchies, they're out of order. They're out of order. Sagittarius is not in its proper place. Capricorn is not in its normally proper place. And he says, why it should be so. But I can't quite make my machine do this. I don't know why at the moment. Maybe I can do this. Maybe something like that. And then I'll go backwards. There, that's the one. Okay. All right. Oop. Yeah, right here. And you see it, of course, you know that. And maybe just to call it to the attention of other people, Capricorn and Sagittarius are out of order. And I think it has something to do with the sacrifice of the solar angels. Now, of course, look, this is a mental structure to us. We are not really in contact with these lives. Even the great Cancerian hierarchy that is at the very top of the cosmic physical plane, about to be liberated onto the cosmic astral plane, is in the same kind of domain as the 7th degree initiate the Christ finds himself. So it's out of our experience. We can make a mental pattern out of it. Yes, we can do that. I guess the important thing is to realize how important Neptune is in our particular solar system, just the way the planet Uranus will be extremely important in the first ray coming solar system. Neptune, if you look at Esoteric Psychology 1, right around page 420, 421, it gives you the esoteric rays of the major planets. And that means monadic ray. Uranus is ray 1 monad, Neptune is ray 2 monad, Saturn is ray 3 monad. So this is all about that part of Cancer which nourishes a very high planetary deity with respect to our particular solar system, and we must not expect that the same interpretation can be used low down in the elemental area of elemental lives and equally at the point of liberation. It's kind of a complex question you're asking here, but I think the answer to it is that there's a whole range of higher and lower possibilities which can be expressed through one of these constellational lords, and we have to know what is being expressed on what level and why. And I'm just suggesting the Neptune Christ expression of Cancer cannot be compared with the elemental expression of Cancer at the lowest part of the creative hierarchies.
Okay.
Well, it's something that has to be dug into, the 3 water signs. Okay, yeah, no problem with Scorpio. That's our particular creative hierarchy, right? And then Pisces is very, very high. It's the highest that we are given in the table of 12 creative hierarchies. And it's certainly, beyond Shambhala in a way. We're not with Shambhala normally. We're not dealing with the cosmic astral plane yet. There probably is an equivalent to Shambhala on the cosmic astral plane. In other words, there are correspondences which are not yet given to us because it's left blank. The cosmic physical plane is articulated. All that stuff going on the cosmic physical plane, then you get to the cosmic astral plane. He hasn't put in a single differentiation, a single articulation. Nothing is there in the usual maps except this particular one map of the higher expression of the creative hierarchies. And then, as you say, there is Cancer, which is transitional. In other words, still on the logoic plane, but already establishing itself somewhat on the lowest levels of the cosmic astral plane. And they mean different things at different strata, if I can put it that way. In other words, they operate in different strata, and you cannot say that they are exactly the same.
Okay, a thought came into my mind.
Yeah.
When we talk about the constellations, when they come down to Earth, they have to do with the signs, and maybe it's not one-to-one as we mathematicians say. Maybe Cancer doesn't reflect to Cancer in the signs that surround Earth, but is behind other signs. Could I say something like that?
Well, my impression is it around page 611 about galaxies as constellations as galaxies of stars and signs as concentrated influences. Is that what we find? Because in my impression, which is a simple impression, the sign Cancer is a concentrated influence of the energy of the constellation Cancer. And thus it goes for every sign. What I found very interesting, I picked up the book Esoteric Astrology by Alan Leo, written back around 1917, or, it was early on. And he had a lot of very interesting ideas which kind of opened the door to the theosophical reception of what Master DK was saying. And my impression from reading DK and Alan Leo is the energy is the same, but much reduced in the sign, and consists of certain Davic lives which are attuned to the energies of the constellation, which are much higher. So I still do look at this as a one-to-one correspondence at this time, at least in relation to our sun and to, I think, to our Earth particularly. Every planet will have a different kind of geometrical relationship to some of these constellations, but I still think the sign is a lesser concentrated representation of the higher energy of the constellation. This is my present working hypothesis.
Okay, Michael, thank you. Actually, it was a question that wasn't formulated 100%. I'm just trying to find my center through these triangles, and I'm trying to think through things.
Yes, I'm sure you will do that, and then you can bring it back with what new you've come up with.
Okay, next time I will ask about the moon. I won't ask now because somebody else might want to ask.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. You bet. Okay.
Okay, and Leslie has shared. You ask what we would like to discuss. What comes to mind is the recognition and right use of crisis. Crisis as a tool for growth. Crisis as the messaging of the soul. Crisis as the meting out of karmic obstacles and repayment. Crises of soul, crises of consciousness. It seems an entire study could be made of a life or life cycle from the standpoint of crisis. And of course, we know that every 7 years, the soul itself delivers a crisis that is also a determining test. At this year's conference, I gave a talk on this topic in The Art of Living, the Art of Navigating Crisis.
Yeah, it sounds like you know quite a bit about it, Leslie. And that is true. It's a as I pointed out before, there is a section in Esoteric Astrology. You know where it is. About is it 472? Is that it? Where particularly the crises of the soul are listed, and they seem to be listed in relation to the initiatory phases. I think the very first thing is to recognize a crisis when it is upon one. Now, DK says you're paying a lot of attention to 7-year cycles. He said I would equally ask that you pay attention to 10-year cycles, in which the last 3 years are kind of a summary of the 7. That would be the Kabbalistic approach, where you can always find a 10 wherever there is a 7. So I think crises are induced. Look at Saturn is a planet which induces crisis, and every 7.5 years or so, Saturn will complete one of its squares, so to speak, and that will bring crisis. And its opposition and other square, all of those are tuned maybe with the number 7. Uranus is interesting too, because it is a 7-year cycle. And so every time Uranus changes sign, it will bring in a new potential for crisis, and especially if it's engaged with some of the major angles or points within the chart. And then who knows when it comes to certain ray cycles carried down onto the microcosmic level. We know something about ray cycles on the racial level, but what about from the time you're born? What kind of ray cycles are operating there? And they also will be inductive of crisis. So to recognize it, this is the key, and not just to suffer with it. You see, one can suffer with it to no good end unless one realizes what the issue can be. What do we have? Crisis, tension, emergence. This is kind of one of those new group of world servers themes, and probably you have used that. We recognize the crisis, we hold the tension of the situation as the higher issue becomes more and more evident and possible of emergence, and then comes the emergence from the crisis, and we have gained. Now, you know, oftentimes it's like making a pyramid out of a cross. The crisis is where the cross is, it's the very center. And as we raise this central point to a position above all the other 4 points of the square caused by the cross, we have a resolution. But of course, I'd be interested, you know, in your presentation, you know, how it is at conferences. I'm here and there and everywhere, but it sounds a fascinating subject. Something further you'd like to say about it? If there is. But you could, you know, you could write it up and you could make, well, you could make a presentation if you like, because it is really important when it comes to the nature of the human being as a scorpionic being. We are born into the possibility of crisis, and rapid progress can belong to the human individual because of the ray. Now, you know, it's really interesting. In Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1, he talks about the fourth ray type, which we could generalize as indicating humanity in a way. And he says the fourth ray type can as easily become a ne'er-do-well as a hero, something like that. The word ne'er-do-well, it means never do well, you know, and it gives the indication of what humanity can be if it's not careful, or there is this pushing ahead with rapidity and much conflict, but a real gain that leads to heroism. So that's kind of our dilemma, being right in the middle as a race and also microcosmically. Okay, so Leslie, was there something further that you wanted to point out?
He was writing again, saying, there is a quote that comes to mind, which is from the 1996 Arcane School Conference. Soul-engendered crises are always for the purpose of illuminating correct choices and decisions. And when we learn to respond to them as a soul, we discover there is no life circumstance that does not offer some gain to the life of the soul when we have learned to live creatively.
That's very good. Yeah, that's very good. And illumination is one result. A deepening love and unification is another result. And courage of the purpose-driven kind is another result. So I'm not sure whether that's something that, you know, DK said, or whether it was one of the presenters that said that, but it's a very good statement. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Okay.
There's a thank you from Isabel, and then Anne Veronica writes, it seems that when you do it into a pyramid, the point of tension stops and the man isn't anymore crucified on the cross of astrological energies.
Yes, I think you could say that. It's as if all these energies of the cross are gathered into one. And the keynote, since we're talking about initiation here, because the pyramid, the pyramid, is, the symbol of the initiation process, you have a synthesis of these energies rather than a rending of the energies. And I suppose a lot of it has to do with the way the cross starts to turn and rise in a spiral to the point of initiative appreciation. We're gaining an altogether higher perspective when the point at the center rises to an adequate elevation. Maybe making what, can it make equilateral triangles? Can there be 4 equilateral triangles in that way? I don't know, I'd have to look into that, but perhaps at a certain point of elevation. Right, so, we take our crises and we make out of them synthesis, harmony, and synthesis. Now, DK was kind of amusing about crisis, basically saying, look, if you're not having a crisis, why aren't you having a crisis? Basically, that's what he has been saying, because we advance so rapidly when we recognize crises and take them on. It's our scorpionic nature. But just imagine all of those poles and counterpoles that exist within the personality and how Buddhi resolves them. The 6th principle, the intuition, the central plane of the spiritual triad. Resolution comes on the Buddhic plane. And that's what we're learning to do. And in the 6th root race, beginning maybe another 2,000 years from now, that's what we will be capable of doing. Even meanwhile, we're learning with the abstract mind, perhaps, how it's done. Okay.
And then Leslie provided a name, Sarah McKechnie.
Oh, Sarah McKechnie, sure. Okay, yeah. My old colleague, she and I were working there at the same time. And was Sarah a speaker at that conference? Because well, anyway, that's more personal. She's been away from the Arcane School for a little while, but maybe she was invited as a speaker. I don't know, possibly. And was it the New York? Yeah, it must have been the New York. It was not the broadcast version that they did last year, I suspect, but maybe an in-person pre-COVID presentation.
Well,
Yeah, Sarah was.
Leslie
Yeah.
wrote that was from her talk 1996.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's right. Okay, 1996. Well, she was very much there in New York. Yeah, very much there in New York. So that is a very good statement by Sarah then. Okay.
And I am seeing no other hands and no other comments, questions in the chat box at this particular point in duration.
In duration, in eternal duration. Are you living in eternal duration? We'll have to take that up, whether eternal duration is reality. You always, in order to have duration, you need relativity. And if there's not more than one, there is no time and there's not even duration. But that is something, our human mind cannot grasp that, I'm afraid. And so we speak of eternal duration. But then, what is it that endures? Maybe we would say the one reality out of all relation to everything else. That's what endures. But that's another class, that's another program, and maybe we'll get into that tomorrow. We'll get into that tomorrow. And let's see here. Right. Okay, friends. So let's do the Great Invocation together. And you are, invited tonight to the 6 p.m. Normal triangles meditation, where we're working with our fellow disciples. And then at 8 o'clock p.m., we will be continuing with our examination of some of those quotations from Master Decay that have to do with this very difficult contest which is occurring within the United States and really all over the world. It's just what's going on in the U.S. is just a concentrated example of what could go on across the world. The dweller really rears its head, and we have to see whether the angel can prevail. Abraham Lincoln, in his second inaugural address, he had that intuition, and he referred to our better angels, rather than the lower, darker aspects of ourselves. Okay, so let me find a good spot for the Great Invocation, and there it is. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Thank you, everyone, and we're continuing, with quite a few programs. One vigil every night, plus our normal ask programs, etc. So I'm going to turn off the recording and ask everybody except Michael, Stacy, to depart. And he and I have some scheduling things to deal with. So thank you for your attendance. Lots of love, many blessings, and we'll be in touch with you soon. Bye-bye for now.